The episode started off with the usual opening sequence. The front door opened, and Steve was in the living room, looking concerned.
I need to tell you something important. Blue is at the vet, and she's having an operation on her heart. I hope she's okay.
Steve stopped talking and looked down at the floor. The scene ended. It cut to a scene where Steve was on the phone. We then hear a woman's voice saying the following.
She was a plushie. We tried our best, but we couldn't get it to beat again. I'm sorry.
A deep voice spoke.
There are 5 stages in the grieving process: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
The voice said.
Steve will experience 3 stages all at once: depression, anger, and mental illness.
Steve was in his bedroom, lying in bed. He began to cry, and the color of the episode turned black and white, and Steve was like a new human being. Steve cried so hard, his breathing grew shallow. The scene ended. The next scene showed Steve sitting up on his bed. He stopped crying, but his face was now red and his teeth were clenched tightly. Steve held his stuffed blue puppy with both hands. He screamed. The top of his lungs. His scream sent chills down my spine. Steve ripped off Blue's head, and Blue squirted out of the stuffed animal's neck. Steve threw Blue in a fit of rage. When the blue puppy landed, its ooze completely covered the floor as Steve managed to calm down. Steve's body began to turn a darker and darker color by the second. After about 5 seconds, Steve turned completely black. He got up out of bed, walked out of the bedroom, and walked into his living room. I thought he was going to sit in the thinking chair, but he didn't. He stood in front of the chair and stared at the screen for a full minute. His eyes lost their pupils and became nothing more than white dots. He started crying again, and white tears streamed down his face. Some sad piano music began to play. A message flashed across the screen. It said, "You can figure out Blue's clues, but you can't figure out insanity." The scene ended. The next scene showed Steve still standing in the living room. He was no longer crying, and his body was a completely normal color.
I can't live without Blue.
He said.
She was my best friend. She gave my life happiness and meaning. Without her, I have nothing to live for.
The kids in the background that helped Steve find the clues started to cry and whimper. They shouted,
"Please don't do it, Steve. We love you. We're your friends too."
I'm sorry.
Steve said.
I'm sorry if I break your hearts for doing this, but I have no choice. Goodbye.
He held up a container. The camera zoomed in on the label, which said, "Potassium cyanide." Steve had a calm look on his face as he swallowed the contents of the container. He instantly collapsed onto the carpet. He foamed at the mouth, while his body twitched and thrashed on the floor like he was being electrocuted. Steve eventually stopped moving, and I knew that he was dead. The episode finally ended with a Nickelodeon logo. It's shaped as the style of atomic cartoons within for a few seconds, as it cut to static.